We're live and we're unmuted. So
All right, cool. 12:15. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us on another episode of
the Raw Take for CEOs.
And today is second week of May, right?
Today's the second week of May, May 12th, here on the Raw Take for CEOs. We're kicking off Marketing May or May Marketing Month. I know that last week we were not yet on that. We were still finishing up our startup series that we had in April. But now we're moving on to the May series. It's all about marketing, right, Dan?
Yeah. And last week we talked about customer success, which is, in my mind, sort of that transition point between marketing, sales, engagement agreements, pricing, if you have that in your business, most of us do, or if it's standard. And customer success kind of takes over and helps customers, introduce customers to the different components of your business. So an important part of our business today. But marketing is obviously, I would say, one of the most important parts of our business. We always say that most businesses really cannot have more than 2 or 3 core competencies. And, some of these core competencies, they're in our DNA. So one of our core competencies, hopefully, which is what customers tend to purchase from us, is financial management, right?
Whatever service that you provide needs to be obviously one of your core competencies.
It has to be one of your core competencies. But in many cases, you also see some companies that are, especially in the beverage, food, where they're not actually making the beverage, they're not canning, they're not actually manufacturing the food.
It's the delivery, right?
It's
or
the
service.
Delivery. Yeah. But I would even go further and say one of their core competencies has to be marketing.
Right.
So back to us, financial management is one of our key pillars, one of 3 core competencies that we work towards. And within that, obviously, we've got the daily bookkeeping and monthly accounting. In addition, obviously, the financial planning and analysis, which is becoming a stronger part of our
business
service offering. And obviously, you're looking at the 2 CFOs here, plus tax advisory and planning. Now, you and I don't need to be like experts in all of those. You really don't want me doing your QuickBooks or your taxes. I don't think I've ever filed taxes on time. But financial management overall, that umbrella is a core competency of this business.
And it doesn't happen. All of those pieces of financial management that are core competencies of GrowthLab didn't happen overnight, right? We start with what we knew what our core competencies were, and we built upon that. We had some acquisitive growth and some acqui-hire type of growth, but big picture, what we want to talk about today is some of our journey in how marketing did become one of those 3 kind of core competencies of GrowthLab. And CEOs out there generally probably don't think of themselves as a marketing company, right? That's something that they're either going to hire or buy from a service provider. And that's kind of our journey. We'll walk through that. But kind of what we want you to get out of this episode is, why should marketing be more of a core competency of my business?
Right. So back to the core competencies. So of the 3, definitely financial management. Number 2, when you're in a human capital and a people business like we are, regardless of how much technology you actually deploy and leverage, you're still in a people business. So you can't really be in a people business and not have HR being a core competency. So I always say our second core competency has always been, our second one has always been HR. Now, 2 parts to HR. There's the compliance part. That's sort of the check the box, right? And that for us has very much always been 80-20. We're never going to be 100% experts in all 50 states. There are always going to be nuances. There's new laws. Even today, we talked about, not a new law, but it's a recent sort of 12 months ago, Massachusetts kind of came out with that family leave. So HR, definitely a core competency. I would say we're much stronger on the strategic side of HR because of how it is intertwined with financial management and business strategy. So
that part is the business strategy part of HR is needs to be part of your whole annual cycle, right? And that's why we touch that. On the compliance side, it's a lot easier to hire that piece of the puzzle, whether you go with your payroll provider, expanding services there, or elsewhere. That one is whenever you're dealing with compliance, it's a lot easier to fill that bucket. It's not as easy for somebody else to come into your business and motivate your people. In a people business, we always say, they leave on a Friday, they have to show up on a Monday for you to drive value. And, as a business owner, it's our job to make sure that they're motivated, make sure that they're, they're feeling valued, so that they show up on a Monday morning ready and excited to deliver value to the customers.
And I always look at the compliance side as, there's a piece of the compliance side, like, yeah, you really can't even get up to bat unless you know certain parts of the compliance. But most of that compliance stuff, and not to minimize it, but it's like knowledge-based stuff, right? There are services out there, like you said. And so before we jump back into the third core competency, which Steve alluded to as in marketing, which is something that kind of was more of a, I referred to it the other day to a potential customer as the unintentional journey that we took to build a core competency around marketing. It was one of those things like we knew we had to. Do you hire out? Do you just, do you cobble it together? But we always talk about the Growth Lab 4, right? And we always felt like, hey, if the Growth Lab 4 is about helping you, the business owner, understand your cash flow, understand where you're making and losing money. Number 3, being pay for performance, and number 4, marketing for profit.
Yep.
Those 3 core competencies kind of, hit on those 4.
Yeah. And we put the Growth Lab 4 together, what, 5-6 years ago. And, it was not to line up with these core competencies, but, marketing has become a core competency of Growth Lab. I mean, now we have 23 employees, and 3 of those employees are marketing people, right? Like, that's, most businesses our size would not be able to say that they have that percentage applied to marketing, when that is not a service that you're directly providing to customers.
Plus, we're hiring a new intern starting in 3 or 4 weeks to help support marketing. So the unintentional journey is kind of interesting, right? Because we look back, everybody has to have a website, everybody has to have a logo, you need to have a company name. We always knew, like, hey, we didn't want this to be Gertrude's and Associates or Byler and Associates, right? We didn't want this to be about us. And so having a name that is independent of, quote unquote, the owners or the shareholders or the managing partners. Never wanted this to be sort of a partner-heavy, partner-driven marketing program.
Right. And going back to our origins, right? We started with a lot of our new leads came from referrals, right? And where we at today is we do still have a strong, solid referral base, but it looks a lot different than it did 6 years ago. But where we started 6 years ago was really on, we knew that content needed to be a core piece of what we develop. And initially, it was not to drive leads, but it was to reduce the sales cycle. Mm-hmm. Put content out there so that when people look for Growth Lab, and they're not finding just our website or our social profiles, if we had them back then, which we did, they're finding content that can help them, content that can educate them, so that they can realize, like, if I bring these people on, I can get value out of this company even before I pay them a dime. So
to kind of go back in history again, the unintentional journey, it really started with the web presence, social media, referrals. Referrals was always a big part of our marketing lead gen. And like Steve just mentioned, about 90 to 95% of our referrals actually used to come from our CPA friends. Now, our CPA friends, they're still friends, but we get approximately 0 referrals per year now from CPAs. So the days of CPAs sending over customers with a shoebox full of crap, receipts, those days are kind of over. So we had to move away from that. We knew we had to define our own destiny. We had to manage and control how we generated leads. And so we went from that web presence, social media presence, begin to diversify our referral and lead generation sources. But more importantly, it was that street credibility that Steve just mentioned was the premise for creating content. Creating that content, getting it out in the local business journals, getting it out online, we actually noticed a reduction from what used to take a full service CFO, FP&A customer would take sometimes 6 months to kind of close, was now taking 2 to 3 months. And that was huge for us because that allows for big growth. So
shorten that sales cycle. That's what everybody wants to do.
and so we went from content creation for the purpose of sales conversion to beginning to develop more of that inbound marketing, nurturing, diversifying our outbound sales. Super passionate about this. And maybe that passion is what begins to define, hey, this is a core competency we have.
And we started, when we're dedicated resources other than your time and my time and Corey's time. When we started dedicated resources, we brought on an intern, right? And I think the part of the reason to bring this all up is it's kind of how we developed, how we grew organically within our service space. Because the unintentional journey, like just to get cut to the chase, where does that journey lead us? We're getting inbound requests. Because of the success that we've had in marketing and people seeing that success out there, inbound requests for our team to replicate that at their business. So that's kind of like the destination of the unintentional journey and why we want to share with you what that looked like for us. But kind of going back to when we first started dedicating separate time to this, was we brought on an intern because we knew at that point we had developed to the point where we knew what we needed and we knew how to manage it. We were not experts at yet, but we knew what we needed and how to manage it, and we needed time to put against it.
And let's face it, even like 7 years later, we're not experts, we're still learning. But with that said, about 2.5 years ago, we began to double down from, we obviously updated our website, but we also brought in an outside consulting firm that was dedicated to digital marketing. And that was quite eye-opening. It allowed us to see the good and the not so good, right? It was a great experience to kind of validate what we've been doing, to open our eyes to other opportunities. But at the end of the day, we knew that we had outgrown them and that we had to begin to build out the team. The key here is, don't put the team first. It's understand, because we do this in our own, and sort of whether it's finance, or accounting, our approach to building an accounting team, our approach to building the FP&A team, didn't start with the team. It starts with the cadence, putting time towards it. It starts with productizing, leveling up the rigor around the deliverables and how it's being delivered. And then it's the who. And so, like you said, we kind of cobbled together the team, right?
And I'm just going to repeat that because it's been core to how we build the different services, right? Cadence, rigor, and team, right? If you're only providing a team, you're just providing access. And yes, you might have the best people, but if the customer is the one that's telling the team what to do, they're only going to get a certain amount of value out of it, right? You're just selling time. And, from day one, we knew we did not want to sell time. So it's not just about the team. Then it becomes about the cadence and the rigor, right? The cadence is, when are you meeting? How often are you meeting? What are you doing in those meetings? How often are you meeting? And then the rigor is, what are you doing in those meetings? And when you're telling customers what you're doing in those meetings, that is the rigor, right? And I think some of our experience with outsourcing some of the marketing function was we did get access to a team that knew what they were doing, but they were not telling us what to do. They were asking us what we wanted them to do. And at that point, we knew we had, as you said, Dan, kind of outgrown what they could provide. Yeah. Because we were the ones that were directing, we were the ones that had the core competency of here's what we need and here's what we need to spend time doing. So we brought that in-house.
Yeah, it was developing that vision. So our vision for marketing is, I would say, has always been, but I don't think we would have articulated this way. At least the last few years, we've started articulating the intentional content, but quite the opposite, very intentional. And I would say about 13, 14 months ago, that became extremely obvious, especially as the economy began to shut down. The paradigm that sort of we could live by over the last 5 years, that was about to change.
Yeah.
We were walking into a new era where we had to come to this realization that nobody was going to buy from us for the next 12 months. And that forced us to become more intentional with the content we were generating and creating, because this takes up a lot of time. This costs not just money, but it's a lot of effort. There are people behind the scenes. It's not just you and I talking here. But what we realized is being more intentional with the content we were creating and and being a little more altruistic with that content, that ultimately helped us, I would say, reposition how we think about inbound marketing and content management.
And even kind of dictated the title of our podcast, The Raw Take for CEOs, because 13, 14 months ago, we were just found ourselves out there talking, office hours, open Zoom meetings, what's going on. We were out there before most people because we're not the CPA. We aren't limited by like what is going to be the letter of the law. Because if you remember, in PPP world, the letter of the law never really came until maybe 3 months ago.
And so, stepping back, what you hear here, what you hear from us, whether it's here or in webinars, especially in the last 12 months, the tone, the approach, the thoughtfulness has not really changed. It's what we used to say to our potential customers 5, 6, 7 years ago. The only difference is it was a one-to-one. There's a lot of hand-to-hand guerrilla sort of marketing, and that's not scalable. And what we realized was what we were actually creating wasn't what we were saying to customers behind the scenes. And I think what happened was 12, 13 months ago, we sort of realized, hey, if we can't have those one-to-ones, we have to have one-to-manys and not lose that tone and voice. So that is our intentional content creation now. We put a lot more thoughtfulness into it. And what's funny is I think we have a lot more fun. The analysts enjoy sort of the more creative side of our content creation now. But then that, part of that inbound marketing, going from content to the nurturing of the leads, we've become a lot more sophisticated,
right?
Whether it's drip campaigns, retargeting, even the tools we're using, we're super deep into HubSpot now. We're not just scratching the surface of HubSpot
and it all comes kind of what you're referring to. It all comes down to data, right? It used to be that people would say, I know that half of my marketing budget is working. I just don't know which half, or a quarter, whatever number you want to put in there. Nowadays, you can tell what is working and what's not working, especially digital content. And I think it's like the four, kind of going to the end of our unintentional journey, we kind of identify what are the 4 pillars of marketing to make it a core competency. Inbound, which is, content creation, so that when people are looking for things that you do, they find your thought leadership, they find your content, and then they come to you. Right?
And then they come to you, and then you nurture them.
And
you're patient with them. You're not forcing them into this package or that package, but you're teaching them. You want potential leads that, they're sort of scratching their head, feeling what they're feeling. They know they need to make a change, and you're helping them understand the difference between your value proposition and some other indirect value proposition, right? It's not always about a one-to-one competitive replacement. In our business, it's like, hey, should I just hire someone internally to do X, Y, and Z? Or can I get more and pay the same or less? And that's a pretty interesting value proposition. So that's inbound marketing for us. There's a lot more components to that, because one of the things that we've also learned in terms of intentional content, it's not just what feels good and what's fun. We're actually beginning to use data to drive what type of content we're creating. So we're using more tools like SEMrush. We're obviously very analytical. We probably spend at least an hour a week reviewing Google Search Console, Google Analytics. SEMrush is nice because it kind of gives you a broader competitive overview of the keywords that are driving traffic to your competitors. And so now we're able to say, hey, that's a great blog. However, it looks like, a competitor XYZ, or hey, there's a lot of traffic going towards this keyword that's quite relevant to what maybe we can add some value. So that's being more intentional with our content creation.
Yeah, so another one of our pillars that sometimes we say should be the overarching one is analytics, right? Because it does come down to data, like you just pointed out. It's not just about creating content, throwing it out there and hoping that it works. It's what content should we be creating, or what content worked, and how can we repeat that with a different angle?
Yeah, you're right. So technically, we should have probably stepped back and say the overarching sort of the umbrella around the 3 pillars is data analytics. Data needs to drive the efficiency and effectiveness of each of these. So inbound marketing, for sure, we just gave the example of, optimizing your blogs for the keywords that are driving traffic to maybe your competitors or maybe some other indirect website. The second pillar has to be and always will be sales, right? And that's, cold leads. How do you get out there? So one of our good competitors and friends over at Reconcile It, Michael, he pointed us to GrowBots. At first I was a little like, oh, you mean I'm going to be like reaching out and, spamming? And it's really not too, we try not to be spamming. There's algorithms.
So it's email marketing, essentially.
It's email marketing, but so we're doing a couple of different types of email marketing. This one in particular is quite cold. It's market segment driven. And Michael Lee kind of, he really pushed us to like, hey, you really need to check this one out. And we did, and it turned out to be quite successful. Unfortunately, there has been some like a little bit of backlash, right? On our Google reviews, the only negative Google review we have was from someone that probably got swept up in our cold outbound email campaigns. It's out there, so we can talk about it. But that's been one sliver of our outbound sales approach. Also, we started using a company called Live Certain recently, and that's been quite interesting, where you're beginning to see, you have your site visitors. You can actually understand not just the persona, but the affinity group. You can go beyond that. It actually tells you kind of who this person is. So that's pretty cool to know that. If somebody's coming to your website and they're sort of like, do I want to go? Do I not want to go? Now you can retarget to that individual through other platforms. The other one is in-market intent.
Mhm.
I think that's a great one because that kind of takes you away of that spammy, like outbound email campaign. Now you're beginning to target those individuals that are truly in market looking for virtual CFO services, bookkeeping, some tax services.
Yeah, you find people that are searching the web, that are looking at other website, looking at your website for the services you're providing. And before they even kind of reach out and identify themselves, in some instances, you're able to identify who they are and send them a note.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, my friend Steve K over at Magic Desk, he's turned me on to a few of these things. One of the things that he said, and we've been feeling it. We've toyed around with this idea. It's inside sales. He told me like the largest medium that is so underutilized right now is that damn telephone. Nobody picks up the telephone. And it's funny because one of the complaints, or one of the criticisms we have with some of our analysts is like, pick up the phone and call the customer. Pick up the phone and call the customer. So that's another great approach, especially as you're building a robust, well-connected. I have found that, at least as we're building out our marketing capability, you can't just rely on one path or one medium or one tool.
For sure.
It's all got to be interconnected.
And part of how we learned that is early in PPP days, we had some great content, and we thought, part of our journey, let's put some money against these keywords, drive some content, drive some traffic to our website, to our blog, to our PPP calculator at the time, right? The only one that was out there. So let's drive some traffic, and that's going to be great for us.
And so the third, and so continuing on with that, like the third pillar in our marketing has been advertising and promotions. Now, to be honest, we have been lukewarm on the whole Google AdWords, LinkedIn, Facebook. We've had good successes. Like we've had
drove a lot of traffic.
Yeah, it drove a lot of traffic. We've learned how to use affinity groups and how to like target. But then even with the ad side of our marketing strategy, it still comes back down to content. Those landing pages, is it catchy? Is it really quickly, within call it 5 seconds, is it really compelling to the individual who just landed on your,
right.
Those CPCs and being very strategic with the CPC, so you're not blowing your marketing budget out of the water. There's a lot to think about. To be honest, we've sort of been lukewarm on that. Where we do double down on that side, on that pillar, is on retargeting. So once we understand that a potential lead has been nurtured, has come to our website, has received some of our email campaigns. Now that's a good time to kind of bounce on that lead in LinkedIn or Facebook, et cetera. So,
And in the digital ad spend, you really need to keep like a weekly, if not daily, eye on your spend and on your analytics. What's working and what's not working? Because the last thing you want to do is spend money on things that are not driving the right people to your content.
but at the same time, Stephen, I will also say you have to be patient. You can't expect that, oh, just because I threw $100 at an ad in 1 week and nothing came out of it, like that's not enough time. What we've also noticed is that ads that have been good ads with the right landing pages that have been, so I don't want to say set and forget, but have given enough time to vintage out, right? So that would be another pointer I would have to throw in there. So those are kind of the three things that, how we look at marketing. And of course, data analytics is key to all this. And it's funny, I get the question like, what does a bunch of finance guys know about marketing? I got to tell you, like my first job out of college was sales, international sales, right? You did a lot of marketing in your first startup and your one of your first full-time jobs. Marketing is core, right? Especially if you're a business owner.
It's knowing your customer, right? And what is the first step in our 10-step approach to building a financial model?
Yeah, it starts with customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, addressable market, go-to-market strategy. I would say if finance people were to build a generally acceptable finance principles type of P&L, it would never start with revenue minus COGS, right? You would start with, hey, what's my marketing spend? And my marketing spend then translates into revenue. It's quite circular. So that's kind of our marketing. That's a little bit of lifting our, the curtain here. We enjoy this. We use quite a few tools, even on our website. We're using Hotjar, big HubSpot company.
Yeah, no, it comes down to tools, but in general, we do refer to this as our unintentional journey because it started out, it always very intentional, but bringing it all together and making it a core competency, that part was, the unintentional. We always knew we needed marketing, but by having it as a core competency of what we do at GrowthLab, and now that we're actually selling these services to customers because they're asking for it, that part was unintentional. We never launched into this thinking I want to build a marketing services business, but we realized that if we build it around cadence, rigor, and team, we can.
Yeah, what's funny is that it was unintentional. It has definitely become much more intentional recently, and I wouldn't even say recently because we had our first marketing customer almost 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And we were probably a little too early to bat. We probably needed a little bit more maturing, but it gave us some great learning experiences. And I think one of the key takeaways was, hey, it's not about hiring, it's about going back to basics. What worked for building an FP&A team or an accounting team or even a tax team, right? Maybe the tax team, we kind of did it a little bit different because of the sort of the level of intellect needed there or experience. It has to start with the cadence, the productization, right? The rigor around the product. And then lastly, it's about the team, building the team once you've had the foundation of the framework in place. And that's what we've now done with marketing. And as we're speaking, we're actually in the process of hiring or looking for that potential director of marketing, someone who can help take charge from a leadership perspective, and hopefully at the same time bring in some learnings and experiences that we
for sure
where we may have some gaps. So that is more intentional now for sure.
So that's about a little bit about our journey. We are going to spend the rest of May. We're going to bring some guests on to the podcast, talk about their journey, and but if you have anything you want us to touch on, any questions you have, let us know. We would love to speak directly to what you're looking to do.
Yeah, marketing is a passion for us. Sales, business development is obviously a passion. I don't think you can be a business owner a founder without, sales being sort of top of mind, number one. Yes, product development's important, finance is important, accounting is important, legal is important, but at the end of the day, without sales, there's really no business. So
I think the last thing for me, at least, I think that's why it makes marketing as a core competency so interesting, because the business owners are the ones that either had an awesome product idea that they built into a business, or they were great salespeople and they built that into a business, right? Those are probably 80% of the businesses out there. You don't find rarely do you find a marketing person or a content person that builds a business, but they're great businesses like Airbnb, right? Design, focus on design, right? But I think that's why we're so passionate about this in speaking to business owners, is that it is often just a piece off to the side that we're going to outsource marketing, right? But it really needs to be something you own and you manage.
yeah, and marketing is still a numbers game, right? So finance people are actually pretty damn good marketers. I'll leave it at that.
Cool.
Nice job. See everybody next time.